Welcome to another episode of the Part 145 EASA training from Phoenix Way Academy. Hi, I'm Sarah.
Hi, and I'm Sam. Well, in this episode, we will continue the topic of 145 but 8.85 changes to the organization.
I was thinking about this regulation, and it's funny how different the mindset is in aviation. In the tech world, it's all move fast and break things.
And if you do that in our world, breaking things has much more serious consequences.
Exactly. Change isn't just exciting, it feels like risk.
It is risk, and that's the perfect way to look at this. Stability is safety. So Regulation 145.A.85 isn't just red tape.
It's a stabilizer.
Yes, it's a gatekeeper, making sure an organization doesn't accidentally wander into an unsafe state.
Okay, so let's walk through that gate. We've got the big changes that need permission, timelines, risk assessments, a lot to cover.
We do. So let's start at the top. The core regulation, 145.A.85, paragraph A. This is the foundation.
Got it. This section lays out the big ones, the changes you absolutely cannot make on your own. That's right. The text says the changes listed shall require prior approval. It's a full stop. You don't proceed without permission.
So what's number one on this list?
Number one is changes to the certificate, including the terms of approval of the organization.
So your scope of work,
Yeah.
what you're actually allowed to do.
Exactly. If you're approved for a Boeing 737 and you want to start on an Airbus A320, that's a fundamental change.
Makes sense. You can't just decide that overnight. What's item number two?
Number two is about people. It says changes of the persons referred to in points 145, A30, A, B, C, and CA.
And just to remind everyone, those are the key post holders, right?
Yes, your accountable manager, your quality and safety managers, maintenance manager, basically the leadership team.
The brains of the operation.
You got it. If you change them, the authority needs to vet the new person. They need to know they're competent.
Okay, on to number three. This one feels a bit more subtle.
It is. Item 3 is changes to the reporting lines between the personnel and the accountable manager.
So this isn't about who is in the job, but who they report to.
Precisely. It's about the structure. The quality manager, for example, needs a direct line to the accountable manager.
For independence.
Exactly. If they suddenly have to report through the production manager, well, that's a huge conflict of interest. The authority has to approve any change to that structure to prevent that.
Right. Now, number four is the one that always sounds a bit like a riddle to me.
It does, a little. It's the procedure as regards changes not requiring prior approval, referred to in point C.
So you need prior approval to change the procedure for things that don't need prior approval.
It sounds meta, but it makes sense. The authority gives you the privilege to handle small stuff internally,
Okay.
but only because they trust your procedure for doing it. If you want to change that procedure, they need to approve the new rules before you can use them.
You can't grade your own homework on how you grade your own homework.
Perfect analogy. And that brings us to the last one, number 5.
Which is?
Additional locations of the organization other than those that are subject to point 145A.85C.
And 75C is about line stations. So this is for your main hangars, your workshops.
Correct. You want to open a new hangar in a new city, you need prior approval.
So to recap, the big five are the certificate, the key people, the reporting structure, the change procedure itself, and your main locations.
That's it. And if you touch any of them, you stop and ask.
And then you wait, which I guess leads us right into the next section, 145A.85B, the approval process.
It does. The text is very clear. The organization shall apply for and obtain an approval. The application shall be submitted before such changes take place.
That word before is really the most important word in the whole sentence, isn't it?
It is. You can't just tell the authority you moved last week. That's an instant finding. They need time to do their due diligence, maybe an audit.
And the approval has to be official, right? There's a reference for it.
Yes, a very important one. It says the change can only be implemented upon receipt of a formal approval in accordance with point 145B330.
Which is the rule governing how the authority acts. So it's all linked up.
It is. And there's another key phrase in there about operating under prescribed conditions during the change.
What would be an example of a prescribed condition?
Well, say you're switching to a new digital record system. The authority might approve it, but with a condition. They might say, okay, you can use the new system, but you have to run the old paper system in parallel for 3 months.
So you're basically on probation until the new system is proven to be safe and reliable.
Exactly that. It prevents a safety gap.
Okay, so that covers the big stuff. But what about all the minor things? An organization changes all the time, right? Updating a form, tweaking a process.
Of course. And the system allows for that. That's Section 3, 145.A.85C, for all the changes that don't require prior approval.
But I'm guessing it's not a complete free-for-all.
Not at all. The rule is that these changes have to be managed and notified according to a procedure that the authority has already approved.
So it comes back to that meta rule from the Big Five list.
It does. The authority doesn't check every small change, but they check the system you use to make those changes. As long as you follow your own approved procedure, you're compliant.
Okay, so that brings up a practical question. We know we have to apply before, but how much before?
Right, the timelines. For that, we turn to the AMC material. AMC 145A85 gives us the actual numbers.
And it breaks it down into different situations.
Yes, three main scenarios. Scenario A is for the certificate itself. The application should be submitted at least 30 working days before the change.
30 working days, so that's about 6 weeks. You need to plan ahead.
You really do. You can't just decide you want a new aircraft rating next week.
Okay, what's the second scenario?
Scenario B is for people. For a planned change of a nominated person, you should inform the authority at least 20 working days before.
A bit less time, about a month, for something like a planned retirement.
Exactly. But things aren't always planned, are they? People can quit suddenly or fall ill. That's scenario C.
Unforeseen changes.
Mm-hmm. The AMC says unforeseen changes should be notified at the earliest opportunity.
Not when you get around to it.
No. If your accountable manager resigns over the weekend, you're on the phone to the authority first thing Monday morning. Transparency is everything.
We started out by saying that change equals risk. The regulation actually forces you to formally think about that, doesn't it?
It does. And that brings us to AMC 2, 145A85. This is where it links directly to your safety management system.
And it has a very specific requirement for those big changes we talked about.
Yes. It says for changes requiring prior approval, the organization should conduct a risk assessment and provide it to the competent authority upon request.
So it's not just about filling out a form. It's about proving you've thought through the safety implications.
That's the crucial point. It's the difference between paperwork and actual safety. It's asking, if we move to this new hangar, is the lighting good enough? Is the ventilation adequate?
And if you haven't done that, the application is basically incomplete.
That's right. They're not just approving the change. They're approving your safety analysis of that change.
Now let's look at the guidance material, the GM, which helps clarify the rules. GM 145A85.
Right. This GM really explains the logic. Point A just repeats the big five list we already covered.
Okay.
But point B is really interesting. It says that if any other part of the regulation requires an approval, it also falls under this prior approval rule.
So there's a hidden list of other things.
There is. We'll get to that in a second. Point C is also important. It talks about the privilege of managing your own small changes.
Privilege, that's a strong word.
It is. It implies it can be taken away. If your safety performance is poor, the authority can revoke that privilege and make you ask for permission for everything.
Wow, that would be a huge operational burden.
It would. It's a huge incentive to stay compliant.
The GM also gives some practical examples, like in GM 145A85A1, about a simple name change.
Yeah, even that needs urgent attention. The GM says you have to apply for a reissue of the certificate as a matter of urgency.
But what about the manuals? If Phoenix Aviation becomes Phoenix Global, do we have to reprint everything?
Thankfully, no. The guidance is practical. It says if only the name changes, you can use your existing documentation to prove compliance while the paperwork is processed.
That's a relief. What about for an unplanned change of a person? That's covered in 2.2.
This is a critical safety net. It says, in an unplanned change, a nominated deputy can ensure business continuity while the new person is being approved.
So if the maintenance manager quits on a Friday, aircraft don't just get grounded indefinitely.
Correct. As long as you have an approved deputy in your manual, they can step in temporarily. The system is designed not to halt operations as long as you're transparent.
Okay, so this brings us to what you called the hidden list. This is in GM 145A85B.
Yes, this is where a lot of organizations get caught out. These are other specific technical changes that also need prior approval.
Let's run through them. What's the first one? Item A.
Item A is changes to the AltMoC. That's alternative means of compliance.
So if you decide you have a better way of doing something than what the standard AMC says.
Exactly. You can't just invent your own methods. Changing your approved alternative requires prior approval from the authority.
Okay, what's B?
Item B is changes to the MOE procedure for the use of alternative tooling or equipment.
Right. If the manual says use a specific tool and you want to use a different one you think is equivalent.
Yep. Changing the procedure you use to prove it's equivalent is a big deal. Bad tooling can cause serious damage.
Then we have C and D, which seem to be about organizations working slightly outside their normal scope.
They are. Item C is about B-rated engine shops doing work on an engine while it's still installed on the aircraft.
Which is normally A-rated work.
Right. And D is similar for C-rated component shops working on a component that's still installed. These are special permissions, and changing the procedures for them needs approval.
What about item E?
Item E covers changes to the procedures to establish and control the competency of personnel.
That feels absolutely fundamental.
It is. How you decide a mechanic is competent is one of the most important procedures you have. You can't just lower that bar.
And the last one, F.
It's a long one. It's about changes to your safety reporting system, specifically if you're on an extended oversight cycle.
Meaning the authority trusts you enough to only audit you every, say, 36 months.
Exactly. If you're on that long leash, they need to approve any changes to how you report your safety data to them.
So 145.A.85 is really about so much more than just a change of address.
It's the connective tissue. It forces an organization to stop, think, and analyze the risk before making almost any significant change. It really is the gatekeeper of stability.
Okay, let's do a quick recap of the main takeaways.
First, the big five: certificate, people, structure, the change procedure, and locations. These always need prior approval.
Second, you must apply before you act and wait for formal sign-off.
Third, even minor changes that don't need prior approval must be handled through a procedure that is approved.
Fourth, know your timelines. 30 working days for certificates, 20 for people, and immediately for anything unforeseen.
And fifth, for any of those big changes, you have to do a formal risk assessment. It's not just paperwork. It's about proving it's safe.
Plus that hidden list of technical procedure changes for things like tooling and competency.
Stability, transparency, and safety. That's the core of it.
Well, that was a fantastic deep dive. It's clear that in aviation, how you manage change is just as critical as how you turn a wrench.
Absolutely. In the next episode, we will cover 3 topics: 145.A90, continued validity; 145.A95, findings and observations; and 145.A120Z, means of compliance.
Follow us on social media under the name Phoenix Way Academy.
Thanks for listening. Stay safe and stay informed.